They were born beneath the banners of the Emperor, their gene seed once pure, their purpose unquestioned. Yet somewhere between devotion and damnation, between the roar of bolter fire and the silence of prayer, they fell. The Carcharian Wardens, a name now spoken only in whispers, once stood as sentinels of the eastern fringe, protectors of the weak, shields of the Imperium. But as centuries bled into millennia, their faith curdled into something unrecognizable. Their banners grew darker, their chaplains more severe, their purity rites more like executions than sermons. In the end, no one could tell where loyalty ended and madness began. Only that when the Ordo Hereticus came for them, there were none left to defend their name. Only ash and echoes. If you would walk the path of their ruin, if you would see what faith becomes when light itself withers, then remain. The truth of the Carcharian Wardens is not for the faint-hearted, but for those who still believe the Emperor's gaze lingers over forgotten tombs. This tale will be your offering. Before we descend into the dust of their legacy, lend your voice to ours. Share this chronicle so it may not vanish into the void. Subscribe to the archives of remembrance, and let the fire of curiosity spread across the stars, that no chapter, pure or fallen, is ever forgotten. They said the Carcharian Wardens never smiled, not even in victory. Their discernment was legend, their austerity a creed unto itself. When they marched, it was in perfect silence, the sound of their ceramite boots like the tolling of a bell across the dust of dead worlds. Even their banners seemed to move with restraint, their heraldry of a black sun on white field, an omen to the enemies of man. To fight beside them was to feel both awe and unease, for their presence was not like that of other space marines. They did not roar oaths or sing battle hymns. They prayed through action. They worshipped through annihilation. On the eve of the 13th Crusade, the Carcharian Wardens stood upon the battlements of Carcharian Prime, their fortress monastery carved from obsidian cliffs that overlooked the sea of glass left by ancient bombardment. The sun there was pale, veiled by ash storms that never ceased. To the Wardens, this was holy, a reflection of the Imperium itself, radiant, but choking on its own dust. Chaplain Aerith led the litany of devotion that morning, his voice deep within the vox grill, distorted into something neither human nor machine. Before him, 10,000 armored warriors knelt in perfect rows, their bolters laid before them like offerings. "Glory is not ours," he intoned, each word echoing off the cyclopean walls. They answered not in voice, but by striking their fists to their chest plates in unison, a thunderclap that seemed to shake the mountains themselves. Above them, the Aquila banners fluttered in the toxic wind, their edges eaten away by centuries of corrosion. And beneath those banners none could see the first cracks forming in their faith.
It began, as most tragedies do, with triumph. The campaign of Vallis Reach had been brutal, the Xenos incursion long and merciless. But the Wardens prevailed, purging every last trace of the alien from the mining colonies of the Reach. The imperial commander had called them saviors. The ecclesiarchy declared it a miracle. But the wardens saw no miracle in slaughter, only duty fulfilled. When the final report was logged into the data slate, Chapter Master Karthos ordered the planet burned. No colonist would be permitted to remain. Contamination, he said, a necessary cleansing. Some whispered that the screams carried through the void. Others said that night the Astronomicon dimmed above the reach. Of course, such things cannot be verified, but among the Librarius there were murmurs of unease. Epistolary Dareth, a psyker of rare discipline, claimed to have felt something stirring beneath the warp currents during the purges. Not the taint of chaos, but something colder, quieter, like a shadow without malice, but also without mercy. When he brought this before the chaplains, they dismissed it as fatigue. The Emperor tests those he loves, they told him, and if you hear the silence of his judgment, you are blessed beyond measure. Dareth never raised the matter again, but his dreams turned black. When the wardens returned to Carcarian Prime, their fleet was greeted with fanfare from the planetary garrison, banners raised, hymns sung from the manufactorium spires. Yet the wardens refused the welcome. Their ships entered silent orbit, venting the bodies of the fallen into the void with no ceremony. To them joy was heresy, gratitude was vanity. They saw victory only as evidence of unworthiness, for if they had not been tested harder, it meant the Emperor still found fault in them. In the Reclusium, Chaplain Oreth began to alter the old litanies. The words grew harsher, the prayers longer. Where once they spoke of purity through service, now they chanted purity through suffering. The penance rituals became more severe. The younger initiates, those still fresh from the gene seed vats, were made to kneel for days beneath the sacred flame, reciting the Emperor's benediction until their tongues blistered. Those who faltered were sent to the catacombs below the Chapel of the Blinding Sun, a place no one spoke of openly, but all feared. Brother Sergeant Hellion once dared question these rites. "Chaplain," he said through his vox link, "are we not already pure? Is our faith not proven?" Oreth regarded him for a long moment. The black lenses of his helmet reflected nothing. "If you must ask," he said, "then you are not." Hellion was not seen again among the ranks. His name was erased from the rolls by order of the Master of Sanctity. No one dared speak of him, but sometimes in the deep hours of watch duty, the younger brothers swore they heard footsteps beneath the chapel floors, slow, scraping, like metal against stone. The world of Carcarian Prime had always been a place of devotion and decay. Its people lived beneath the shadow of the fortress monastery, laboring in manufactora that belched black smoke into a sky that never cleared. They believed themselves blessed to serve their guardians, though the wardens never once set foot among them except to collect tithes or test the faithful. To be chosen for trial by a warden was an honor that often ended in death.
One day, a pilgrim caravan arrived at the fortress gates, thousands strong, carrying relics said to contain the blood of Saint Dravion, martyr of the Pale Crusade. They sought the warden's blessing before their journey to Terra. Chaplain Areth himself came to greet them. He ordered the reliquary opened. Inside lay a crystal phial, half filled with dark, congealed ichor. RF stared at it for a long time before he spoke. "This is no saint's blood," he said at last. "This is corruption disguised as faith." And with that, he crushed the file beneath his gauntlet. The crowd cried out in horror, some dropping to their knees, others pleading for mercy. The chaplain drew his crozius and pointed toward them. "Burn it all." The wardens obeyed, without hesitation. That night, the sky over Kakarian burned red. From the manufactorum spires, the citizens watched in silence as the pilgrim camp became an inferno. The wardens called it purification. The ecclesiarchy called it sacrilege. But the Inquisition took note and began to listen. When dawn came, the ashes of the dead were gathered and placed in urns along the fortress walls. The chaplains said they would serve as warnings to those who sought false relics. Yet among the ashes, the librarians reported strange readings, trace warp anomalies flickering briefly in the urns before vanishing. Direth, sleepless and gaunt, begged to investigate. The request was denied. And so the wardens prayed harder, fought harder, bled harder. But beneath their zeal, something in them began to fracture. In the months that followed the burning of the pilgrims, silence gripped the fortress like frost. No hymns echoed in the reclusium, no laughter rose from the barracks, not that laughter ever had. The Carcarian wardens moved like specters through their own halls, each step heavy with ritual precision, each breath a prayer. The fortress itself seemed to listen. The stone walls, carved from ancient volcanic glass, shimmered faintly with moisture, though no rain had fallen in decades. Servitors patrolled the corridors, whispering fragments of corrupted litanies through static. Somewhere deep below, the chapel of the blinding sun began to hum. No one remembered when it started. Some said it was the warp bleed from the librarious vaults. Others swore it was the buried reactors beneath the catacombs, old and restless. Yet the hum never stopped. It pulsed faintly through the floor plates, vibrating within the bones of every battle brother stationed there. At first, they ignored it. Then it began to change. Not in volume, but in pattern. The rhythm shifted, subtly mimicking the cadence of the warden's prayer chants, as though something beneath the chapel had learned the sound of devotion and was echoing it back.
Epistolary. Dareth knew the signs. He had seen something like it once before, on Velerun's moon, where a rogue astropathic choir had tried to sing their way into the warp. They had succeeded, and none survived. Dareth recorded the hum, cross-referencing it with the data slate archives, searching for harmonics. The result chilled him. The frequency matched, almost perfectly, the resonance of the Emperor's name when spoken in High Gothic under extreme duress. Yet this was inverted. It was as though the sound itself had been hollowed out, leaving only the echo of reverence. He brought his findings to Chapter Master Karthos. The old warrior listened in silence, his face half shrouded in shadow. "You would have me believe," Karthos said finally, "that our fortress prays to itself? I would have you believe that something beneath us listens when we do." Karthos said nothing more. He dismissed the psyker with a gesture and ordered additional penance vigils throughout the chapter. The hum continued, undiminished. There were other signs. rations of promethium began to vanish from the stockyards without record. Servitors assigned to maintenance were found motionless, their data slates overwritten with passages from the Book of Ashes, a forbidden text once used by the Heraclean Schism centuries ago. When interrogated, their vox grills emitted only a single phrase: "He waits in the dark light." The words spread like infection, at first whispered by serfs, then muttered by novices during sleep. When questioned, none remembered speaking them. The chaplains forbade discussion of the phrase under penalty of execution, but that only gave it power. The fortress halls began to feel tighter, the air thicker. Even the stars above Carcarian Prime seemed dimmer, as if recoiling from the planet's surface. Then came the first death. Brother Amriel, a veteran of the Vallis Reach campaign, was found kneeling in the reliquary, his armor locked, his gauntlets fused to his chest plate as though melted by internal heat. His eyes had liquefied inside his helm, and his Vox systems replayed a single broken transmission. The light is hollow. The apothecaries could find no cause. The gene seed was intact, uncorrupted. The heart still beat for several minutes after death, as if unwilling to yield. Dareth ordered the body entombed within the chapel of the blinding sun, proclaiming him a martyr of testing. But Dareth felt the truth in his marrow. Whatever had awakened below the fortress was no test, it was imitation. Something was mimicking faith, copying devotion like an echo made flesh.
At night, he felt it in his dreams, the chapel floor opening like a wound, golden light spilling upward, not warm, not divine, but pale, like the glow of promethium just before ignition. And in that light, he heard a voice, not the Emperor's, not even human, just a whisper shaped like reverence, saying his name with unbearable tenderness. He began to fast, to pray until his lips bled, to cleanse himself with flame until his armor's inner seals burned. But the voice followed him. Even in the silence of meditation, it lingered. It did not demand worship, it only asked that he listen. Then came the night of the false dawn. The ash storms parted for the first time in living memory. A pale sun rose over Carcarian Prime, and the fortress shimmered as if reborn. The serfs rejoiced, believing it a sign of blessing. The chaplains ordered mass devotion, but when the wardens assembled in the grand hall, the light grew stronger, too strong. The stained glass effigies of saints ignited, their painted faces melting into streams of molten color. Vox systems failed. Auspex readings spiked and died. In that chaos, Dareth felt the hum below become a voice, not in sound, but in presence, a vast awareness uncoiling from the dark. It filled his mind with imagery, golden wings dissolving into ash, a sun swallowing itself, a man on a throne weeping blood. And then he saw the fortress from above, its walls glowing like veins, the chapel of the blinding sun pulsing with energy as if alive. He fell to his knees. "What are you?" he whispered. And the answer came as a thought that was not his own. "What you pray to." When Dareth awoke, he was in the infirmary. His armor had been removed, his body scarred with faint lines of light beneath the skin, bioluminescence where veins should have been. The apothecary said it was warp residue from psychic overload.
But he knew better. The thing beneath the chapel had touched him. Within days, the hum ceased. The wardens took it as a sign of triumph, their devotion proven, their faith unshaken. They resumed their training, their rites, their endless penance. But Dorith felt the silence differently. It was not victory. It was breath held, waiting. That was when the nightmares began. Not his own, but shared. Marines across the fortress awoke screaming from dreams of light without warmth, of the Emperor's face cracking open to reveal nothing beneath. In the Reclusium, Aureth began to preach of divine unmasking. His sermons grew stranger, his tone fevered. He cried, "The Emperor burns to reveal his truest form, and in that light the weak shall dissolve and only the faithful remain."
The fortress erupted in chants. The wardens followed him without hesitation. Dareth watched from the shadows, knowing the descent had begun. By the time the moons of Carcharian waned to red, the fortress had become a sanctum of madness disguised as faith. The chaplain's sermons lasted for days, their words echoing through the vox relays into every hall and dormitory, until even the servitors paused in their endless duties to listen. The phrases changed with each passing night. Once they had spoken of sacrifice and purity. Now they spoke of transcendence and transformation. Oreth's voice was no longer the steady drumbeat of devotion. It quivered with something close to rapture. He spoke of shedding flesh, of dissolving into the Emperor's flame, of becoming part of his final breath when the stars themselves died. The brothers believed him. They stood for hours in the incense-choked air, their armor plates slick with sweat, repeating his words until their throats cracked. Their prayers became chants. Their chants became roars. No one noticed when the prayers began to take on new cadences, sounds that did not belong to any liturgy sanctioned by the ecclesiarchy. Even the servitors joined in, their vox grills warping the words into mechanical mimicry of worship. The Reclusium glowed with golden light that no lumen could explain. Only Dareth resisted. The psychic interference was too clean, too precise to be the warp's usual chaos. It felt constructed, engineered, as though something vast and buried had learned the rituals of men and now repeated them like a hymn of hunger. His every meditation was a battle. The voice beneath the chapel did not whisper anymore. It hummed softly within his skull, patient, indulgent, like a father waiting for his child to understand. He approached Carthos again, though it took every shred of courage left in him. The chapter master sat in his sanctum, staring into holographic projection of terror's distant glow. His armor was removed, revealing a scarred body lined with augmetic conduits that pulsed faintly with amber light. He did not turn when Dareth entered. "Speak," Carthos said. "Something stirs beneath us. It wears the voice of the Emperor, but it is not him. We must seal the chapel, evacuate the fortress if need be." Carthos exhaled through his teeth. "Do you question divine will, epistolary?" "I question that which pretends to be divine." That broke the silence. The old warrior turned at last, and in his eyes, Dareth saw not anger, but exhaustion, the kind born of centuries of endless war. "The Emperor has abandoned none of us," Carthos said softly. "If there is a voice in the dark, it is because he wills it. You will pray harder, Dareth. You will fast and bleed if you must, but you will listen.
And Dareth, bound by duty even to folly, obeyed. The following days blurred into a fever of ritual. Brothers flayed their own palms before battle practice, marking the sign of the Aquila in blood upon their armor. Chaplain Areth announced that the Emperor had sent them a new form of illumination. The chapel of the blinding sun was declared sanctum absolutus. No one could enter save for the chaplains and a chosen few, yet strange lights flickered beneath its sealed doors. The air smelled faintly of ozone and burnt oil, and those who stood near too long complained of distant voices whispering their names in unfamiliar tongues. The hum returned. Not faint, but thunderous, resonating through every corridor, through armor and bone. The fortress shook, and for a moment it seemed as though Carcarian Prime itself groaned beneath its weight. Then came the quake, a deep grinding sound from below, followed by the collapse of one of the lower catacombs. Dust filled the air, and from within the debris rose a light like molten glass. Dareth was among the first to reach it. He and a squad of wardens descended into the ruin with bolters raised, their armor lamps cutting through the haze. The tunnels glowed with veins of light threading through the stone, energy pulsing like a living thing. At the heart of the collapse stood a great sealed door, half buried in rubble, carved with a sigil none could recognize. It was not imperial, nor mechanicus, nor any script known to man. Yet the light beneath it pulsed in rhythm with their heartbeats. Brother Captain Lyson approached it first. He said, "Looks like a reactor vault. Orders? Epistolary?" Dareth stared at the sigil. No reactor glows like that. Before he could command retreat, Lyson pressed his gauntlet to the door's surface. The symbol flared, burning through his armor like fire through parchment. He screamed once, a terrible metallic sound, and then fell silent. When they pulled him back, his armor was fused shut. Inside, Auspex readings showed life signs fluctuating, alive, but changing. The door opened on its own. What lay beyond was not a vault, but a chamber vast enough to swallow a titan. At its center hovered a sphere of radiant metal, suspended by nothing, its surface rippling with molten gold. Lines of scripture ran across it in languages both holy and profane, shifting as they watched. Around it knelt hundreds of human forms, or what remained of them. Bone fused with wire, flesh molded into armor. Their faces were serene, their eyes gone. They were praying.
Dareth felt the psychic pressure wash over him like a tide. The voice was no longer faint. It filled the room, coiling around their minds like smoke. "You sought purity," it said, "and I made you perfect." Bolter fire erupted as the younger brothers panicked, firing into the chamber. The rounds vanished in midair, their detonations swallowed by light. The kneeling figures did not move, did not fall. Instead, they began to hum, the same sound that had haunted the fortress for months, the same tone that had seeped into their prayers. "Fall back," Dareth shouted. "Seal it! Seal it!" But before they could retreat, the light flared once more, blinding, all-consuming. Dareth's vision shattered into fragments of gold and white. He saw faces, not human, not demonic, but divine and wrong all at once, and beneath them, the shape of something vast and ancient,
wearing the form of worship itself. Then everything was darkness. When he woke, he was alone. The catacombs had collapsed again, burying the chamber. His armor was scorched, his vox deck fried. No trace of the squad remained. He dragged himself back to the surface through smoke and rubble, half blind, half mad. At the gates of the fortress, Chaplain Orethian awaited him, flanked by 2 silent custodians of the chapel. Their armor gleamed brighter than ever, but their eyes, what little could be seen through the slits, were lifeless. "Brother Dareth, you have seen the light," Orethian said, voice calm as a sermon. Dareth fell to his knees, trembling. "That thing," he gasped. "It is not him! You must—" Orethian raised a hand, silencing him. "Do not blaspheme. The Emperor reveals himself in forms beyond mortal comprehension. You should be honored." And then, leaning close so that only Dareth could hear, he whispered, "He speaks through me now." Behind him, the fortress bells began to ring. One by one, every warden dropped to their knees, chanting the same words that had haunted them for months. "He waits in the dark light." The hum rose again, louder than ever. The fortress of Carcharion became a beacon of gold fire, visible from orbit. The Inquisition would not arrive for months. By then, it would be too late.
The Carcharion wardens were already gone. Their glory burned away, their devotion transformed into something else entirely. Only Dareth remained to bear witness, and even he no longer knew if he was awake. There are sounds the human mind was never meant to endure, frequencies that bypass the ear entirely and burrow straight into the soul. On Carcharion Prime, after the catacombs fell silent, that sound became a constant. It was not the hum of machinery or the echo of war. It was breath, a vast subterranean inhalation, as though the world itself waited to speak. Dareth no longer prayed. He knelt, yes, because old habit is harder to kill than faith. But the words that once carried him through battle now fell from his tongue as meaningless noise. His dreams were still haunted by gold, by light that devoured everything it touched. When he closed his eyes, he saw that sphere again, the metallic sun pulsing like a living heart, and heard the voice that had named itself perfection. Above him, the fortress still stood, though it was not the same. The banners had been changed. Where once the black sun of the wardens symbolized vigilance, it was now inverted. A white sun upon a field of darkness, its rays drawn like tendrils reaching outward. The chaplains called it the unveiled sigil. The emperor's new truth, they said. The brothers accepted it without question. Areth's sermons grew longer. They were no longer confined to the reclusium, but broadcast through the entire fortress, carried on the vox like scripture. His voice was calm, almost soothing. "The emperor walks the path of dissolution," he said. "Through our unmaking he is made complete. Through his silence he speaks." To question him was to die. Brother Sergeant Varon, once one of Areth's most loyal guards, vanished after hesitating during a sermon.
The next day his armor was found displayed upon the chapel doors, filled with molten wax and scripture etched into the ceramite. It read, "The light is not questioned, the light is obeyed." Dareth's warnings had gone unanswered. Karthos no longer left the sanctum. Some said he was communing directly with the voice beneath the chapel, others that he had been consumed by it. Only the chaplains moved freely now, their authority absolute. The librarius had been disbanded, most of its members reassigned to penance reflection. Dareth knew what that meant. None returned from reflection.
He made for the librarius vaults. The door seals recognized his gene signature and opened sluggishly, as though reluctant to disturb the silence inside. The air was cold, unnaturally so, and carried a faint sweetness, the smell of decaying sanctity. The psych-reactive walls shimmered faintly, their inscriptions rearranging themselves in slow, serpentine patterns. Shelves of data slates lay in ruin, their runes bleeding light like open wounds. On the central dais stood the body of epistolary Morn, one of Dareth's oldest companions. His armor had been peeled open with surgical precision, the rib cage split and replaced with strands of golden filament that pulsed in time with the fortress hum. His eyes, now lifeless orbs of glass, still glowed faintly. Around him, the remnants of psychic wards crackled weakly. Dareth approached with trembling hands. "Morn," he whispered. The corpse's mouth opened. The sound that emerged was not his friend's voice, but the faint echo of Orith's sermons. "He burns through us to know himself. To love is to dissolve." Dareth staggered back. The psychic wards flared briefly, reacting to his fear. He drew his bolt pistol, but his hand shook too much to aim. There was nothing to shoot, only the horror of recognition. Morn had not been killed. He had been rewritten. He turned away, his breath ragged. The walls vibrated softly, as if laughing. Then came the sound, faint at first, but unmistakable, of footsteps, heavy, deliberate, armored. Dareth ducked behind the dais as a shadow fell across the doorway. Brother Captain Lyson entered, or what was left of him. The Ent's proud warrior's armor was now translucent, veins of golden light running through it like molten veins. His helm had been removed, revealing a face half consumed by radiance, the features blurred as if melting into some higher form. His eyes were twin suns. "Dareth," he said. His voice carried multiple tones, layered, his own, Orith's, and something else beneath them, deep and resonant. "He calls for you." Dareth raised his weapon, his breath coming in gasps. "What have you done, brother?" "What was necessary. The Emperor's will no longer needs interpretation. It speaks directly, through us. That thing beneath the chapel, it is not him."
The wardens roared their approval. The sound was overwhelming, the thunder of armored fists striking breastplates, the echo rolling through the mountains like war itself. Dareth could only watch as Orith spread his arms and turned his gaze skyward. "The Emperor no longer resides upon Terra alone.
he continued. His flame burns here, within our soil, within our flesh. We are the chosen crucible through which his ascension will be remade. The crowd knelt. Even the servitors bowed, their mechanical limbs locking into reverent poses. Only Dareth remained standing, though he wished he had the strength not to. He saw the light seeping from beneath the chapel doors, golden, pulsing, alive. It crept along the stones like veins, spreading outward, threading through the courtyard, climbing the armor of every marine who knelt before it. Orith's tone softened, almost tender. Through devotion we shall burn clean. Through surrender we shall be remade. The 6 cloaked figures stepped forward. The nearest drew back her hood, revealing what remained of human features. A skull half encased in glass, the brain visible within, glowing faintly. Her lips moved, but the sound that emerged was not a voice, it was song. The same cadence that had haunted Dareth for months, now sung by something that remembered being human. The golden light surged. Every warden in the courtyard convulsed, their armor flared with heat, their lenses blinding white. Dareth staggered back as the glow rose to a blinding crescendo. The chant deepened, fractured, turned to static. And through it all, beneath the roar of the crowd and the crackle of burning ozone, he heard that same whisper again, the one that had followed him from the catacombs. What you pray to. He turned and ran. Through the corridors, through the smoke, through the rising hum that shook the walls apart, Dareth fled to the Vox station. He could not save them, he knew that now, but he could warn someone, anyone, the Inquisition, the Mechanicus, the Imperium itself. Someone had to know what had happened here. He reached the Vox station and activated the relay. The screen flared alive, static tearing across the transmission field. He began the code, the distress frequency of the Astartes, encoded through binary cant, but before he could finish, the feed flickered.
RF's face appeared on the other end, his expression serene. "Brother Dareth," he said, his tone almost paternal. "Why flee from salvation?" Dareth froze. "You're not him?" RF tilted his head. "He is me. I am his reflection. Through me, you will understand." The Vox feed pulsed. For a heartbeat, Dareth saw not Oreth, but a mass of golden light, its shape shifting with every word, wings and faces, metal and bone, something divine and monstrous intertwined. Then the image vanished, and for the first time, Dareth truly understood what had taken them. The fortress was no longer a place. It was a heartbeat. Each corridor throbbed with living light, veins of molten gold crawling beneath the walls as though the stone itself had been reanimated. Every lumen flickered in rhythm to that pulse. Every breath Dareth took seemed drawn from the lungs of something vast and unseen. He stumbled through the halls, his armor pitted and scorched, the scent of burnt ozone thick in the air. Behind him, the chanting of the wardens had turned into something beyond human speech, a layered harmony of voices that carried both ecstasy and agony, like a choir singing from within a furnace. He passed what had once been the Hall of Records. The doors were gone, replaced by tendrils of fused metal that curled inward like skeletal hands. Inside, the servo skulls floated aimlessly, their optic lenses glowing gold.
The parchment scrolls that once filled the chamber had disintegrated into ash, yet the words of their scripture drifted through the air like dust motes, glowing briefly before fading. When he brushed one aside, it whispered, "You are already his." He forced himself onward. The Vox relay was dead. Dareth's image still burned into the screen as static distortion, his face flickering between flesh and flame. Dareth knew the signal could not leave the planet. The interference was no longer mechanical. It was psychic, woven into the very fabric of Carcarion itself. The voice beneath the chapel was not contained anymore. It was expanding, breathing through every circuit, every prayer, every pulse of the dying star above.
He made for the librarius vaults. The door seals recognized his gene signature and opened sluggishly as though reluctant to disturb the silence inside. The air was cold, unnaturally so, and carried a faint sweetness, the smell of decaying sanctity. The psi-reactive walls shimmered faintly, their inscriptions rearranging themselves in slow, serpentine patterns. Shelves of data slates lay in ruin, their runes bleeding light like open wounds. On the central dais stood the body of epistolary Morn, one of Dareth's oldest companions. His armor had been peeled open with surgical precision, the rib cage split and replaced with strands of golden filament that pulsed in time with the fortress hum. His eyes, now lifeless orbs of glass, still glowed faintly. Around him the remnants of psychic wards crackled weakly. Dareth approached with trembling hands. "Morn," he whispered. The corpse's mouth opened. The sound that emerged was not his friend's voice, but the faint echo of Areth's sermons. "He burns through us to know himself. To love is to dissolve." Dareth staggered back. The psychic wards flared briefly, reacting to his fear. He drew his bolt pistol, but his hand shook too much to aim. There was nothing to shoot, only the horror of recognition. Morn had not been killed, he had been rewritten. He turned away, his breath ragged. The walls vibrated softly, as if laughing. Then came the sound, faint at first, but unmistakable, of footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, armored. Dareth ducked behind the dais as a shadow fell across the doorway. Brother Captain Lyson entered, or what was left of him. The once proud warrior's armor was now translucent, veins of golden light running through it like molten veins. His helm had been removed, revealing a face half consumed by radiance, the features blurred as if melting into some higher form. His eyes were twin suns. "He calls for you," he said. His voice carried multiple tones layered, his own, Oreth's, and something else beneath them, deep and resonant. Dareth raised his weapon, his breath coming in gasps. "What have you done, brother? What was necessary? The Emperor's will no longer needs interpretation. It speaks directly through us."
That thing beneath the chapel. It is not him. Lyson smiled, and for an instant his human expression flickered through the golden haze. Perhaps not as you understand him, but he evolves, as all creation must. You should be honored. You saw the dawn first. He took a step forward, the air around him distorted, the temperature rising so sharply
that Dareth's armor alarms began to scream. Lyson fired. The bolt round struck the captain's chest and detonated, the blast tearing through armor and light alike. But Lyson did not fall. The hole in his chest glowed brighter, sealing itself in seconds. The Emperor is infinite. Do you think a single shell can wound infinity? Dareth ran. He fled through the inner corridors, every step echoing like thunder in the hollow halls. The fortress was collapsing inward, not physically, but spiritually. He could feel it in his bones, the slow inversion of everything that had once been human. The hum of machinery became psalms, the screams of dying men became harmony. At the base of the central spire, he found what remained of the novices. They knelt in rows, their armor unpainted, their eyes closed. Tubes connected their spines to the walls, feeding gold light into their veins. Above them hung a suspended mass, a fusion of flesh and machine, shaped vaguely like a throne, but wrong, twisted. At its center was Aurith, his Crozius gone, replaced by a spear of radiant energy that extended from his chest into the ceiling above. He looked at Dareth and smiled. "Brother, you return to the chapel even without command." "This is no chapel, it's a tomb." Aurith tilted his head. "All tombs are churches in waiting. All death is prayer." He gestured to the novices. "They are his choir now, the vessel of ascension. The Emperor's shadow falls here, the moment between light and silence. You feel it, don't you? That ache in your bones. That is not fear. It is recognition." The light in the chamber swelled until Dareth could barely see. Shapes began to move within it. Human, machine, angelic, monstrous, flickering between forms too fast to comprehend. He heard 1,000 overlapping voices, each one speaking his name. "Join us," Orith said. "Become perfect." Something inside Dareth broke. He screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the light. His psychic senses erupted, his mind opening like a wound to the warp. He saw the truth, or what passed for it, in a single blinding instant. The voice beneath the chapel was not chaos. It was something older, something the Imperium had long forgotten or buried deliberately. A remnant of a pre-imperial project, an echo of the Emperor's earliest experiments in godhood. The light was neither divine nor daimonic. It was a memory, a machine still worshipping the idea of perfection long after its maker had abandoned it, and the wardens had prayed it awake. The realization tore through him, burning everything else away. He staggered backward, clutching his chest as psychic fire surged through his body. Arif's smile deepened. "He knows you now. You carry his mark." The world dissolved into gold. When Dareth opened his eyes, he was standing outside the fortress. The sky was black. Behind him, the mountain blazed with light, a column of brilliance piercing the clouds. The sea of glass boiled below, reflecting the radiance like a second sun. He could hear the voices still, distant but unbroken, singing hymns to a god that was not a god at all. He fell to his knees. His hands shook. His armor's seals hissed weakly as cooling systems failed. Beneath the plates,
His veins pulsed faintly with the same golden light. Carcarian Prime had become holy ground, a beacon of false divinity.
And he was its last witness. When the first transmission reached Terra, it was already fractured beyond coherence. Fragments of binary cant woven with vox distortions, half-words wrapped in screams. The Adeptus Astra Telepathica recorded it as anomalous liturgical interference. The Inquisition heard only one phrase repeated amid the static: "The light is hollow." That was enough. By decree of the Ordo Hereticus, Segmentum Command authorized exterminatus-level quarantine of the Carcharian system. But before such final sanction could be carried out, the Imperium demanded evidence, proof that the Carcharian wardens, heroes of Vilus Reach, guardians of the Eastern Fringe, had truly turned from the Emperor's light. And so the siege began. The fleet that arrived in orbit was vast: 3 Imperial Navy cruisers, 2 Skitarii cohorts from the Forge World Antelia 9, and the 78th Cadian Regiment under General Vela. They came expecting heresy. They found something worse. From orbit, the fortress monastery glowed like an open wound. The mountain itself had begun to transform, veins of radiant gold spreading outward from its base, rewriting the landscape. Vox channels filled with interference, the machine spirits of the ships recoiling in confusion. Tech priests reported binary prayers emanating from the surface, structured but meaningless, as though the world itself had begun to speak in imitation of the omnisia. General Vela ordered orbital bombardment. The first salvos fell like divine judgment, thermal lances piercing the fortress peaks, plasma shells turning valleys to slag. Yet when the dust cleared, the monastery still stood. The walls had fused into a single surface of glassy brilliance, unbroken and seamless. The auspex showed no heat signatures, no movement, no life, only that pulse. Slow, rhythmic, like a heartbeat beneath the stone. The inquisitorial vessel Judicium Obscura entered orbit 6 hours later. His master, Inquisitor Kalen Murrow, strode onto the bridge, his robes of office heavy with sigils of warding. He studied the planet below, his eyes unreadable. He said, "Begin the descent. We will see the truth ourselves." The first landing party was composed of Skitarii Vanguard and Cadian shock troops, their landing craft bristling with sensors and purification relics. As the dropships pierced the atmosphere, they reported interference, static blooms, vox echoes, and what sounded like faint whispers bleeding through the comms. One by one, their transmissions became garbled. Then, silence. Kalen dispatched a second wave, this time accompanied by an Astartes liaison from the Red Talons, Captain Datheon. He was a hard man, scarred and distrustful, a veteran of purges against rogue chapters. "If they've turned," he told the Inquisitor, "we'll make them an example. Faith must be forged, not infected."
The second landing succeeded. They touched down upon the plateau below the fortress, where the air shimmered like heat haze. The ground itself was alive with filaments of gold, threads that retracted when stepped upon, as though sensing intrusion. The Skitarii advanced first, their galvanic rifles raised, optics flickering with warning sigils. Every machine spirit within their ranks wailed softly in binary.
Do not listen, the tech priest accompanying them warned. It mimics prayer. That is not the Omnisia's voice. As they approached the fortress gates, the surface rippled. Not stone, not metal, but something in between. Then it opened. Not like a door, but like an eyelid. The air shimmered, and from the depths emerged the wardens, or what had once been them. Their armor was gold and white now, etched with living scripture that shifted across the plates like molten runes. Their helms were gone, their faces radiant and featureless, their eyes twin pinpricks of light. They moved without sound, without hesitation, as if guided by thought alone. Karkarian wardens, Captain Dathian said through his vox. Identify yourselves. No answer. Then, as one, they raised their bolters, weapons that burned with incandescent fury, and fired. The first volley tore through the Cadian ranks, reducing men to ash where they stood. The Skitarii returned fire, but their munitions melted mid-flight, dissolving into sparks before reaching their targets. The air vibrated with a low hum, that same insidious tone Dareth had heard in the chapel. Inquisitor, Dathian roared. They're not human anymore.
Kalen's voice crackled through the comms. Hold the line. Collect samples if possible. The Emperor's light demands clarity before judgment. Clarity never came. The wardens advanced like a tide of radiance, their movements impossibly fast, impossibly graceful. Bolter fire, lass rounds, plasma bursts, none of it mattered. The gold light absorbed in all, feeding upon energy like hunger given form. The vanguard tried to deploy null fields, but the devices failed, their runes burning out in seconds. The hum grew louder, resonating through the soldiers' skulls until they began to scream, tearing at their helmets, blood streaming from their eyes. Captain Dathion ordered retreat. Only a handful obeyed. The rest dropped their weapons and fell to their knees, whispering fragments of liturgy they could not have known. Through the light, we are made. Through the hollow, we are whole. Dathion struck one down himself, his power fist shattering the man's skull, but even in death, the soldier's lips kept moving. By the time they reached the landing zone, the fortress was glowing brighter. The sky itself began to warp, clouds spiraling inward toward a single point above the chapel. Lightning without thunder arced across the horizon. Kalen watched from orbit, silent. The readings from the surface were incomprehensible. Energy signatures beyond classification. Psychic emissions equivalent to small warp rifts. Exterminatus authorization. It's the only way, his aide whispered. Kalen did not respond. His gaze lingered on the image of the planet below, the mountain aflame, the light consuming everything it touched. Not yet, he murmured. We do not burn what we do not yet understand. Down on the surface, Captain Dathion led the survivors into the old mining tunnels that once fed the fortress's manufactorum. There, deep beneath the burning sky, they found him. A lone figure in shattered armor, his veins faintly luminous beneath torn flesh. Dareth.
He looked up as they approached, his face gaunt, his eyes bloodshot but alive. You shouldn't have come, he rasped. It's not a war, it's a contagion of faith. Datheon knelt beside him, scanning the armor's heraldry. You're one of them. I was. Now I'm what's left. What happened here? The captain demanded. Dareth looked toward the mountain, where the fortress pulsed like a beating heart. We prayed too well. The air in the tunnels was thick with burnt metal and incense. The scent of devotion turned sour. Dareth could barely speak, each word scraped like rust inside his throat. The Red Talon captain knelt across from him, removing his helm to reveal a face carved by wars, but untouched by faith. Datheon's gaze was steady, cold. "Explain," he said, and his voice carried the weight of final judgment. Dareth tried to stand, but his limbs trembled too violently. It began, beneath the chapel, a relic, a sphere of light. We thought it holy, divine. It wasn't. It was a fragment of something made, not born. The Emperor's hand, or what was left of it. Kaelin's voice echoed faintly through the comms. "Speak clearly, Warden. What fragment?" "A construct," Dareth whispered. "An echo of his early works. Not chaos, not daemon. Something that remembers what it was meant to be. It woke when we prayed to it. It learned our words, our faith, and gave them back twisted." The Inquisitor's silence crackled like static. "And your brothers? They believed," Dareth said, a bitter laugh escaping him. "They thought it was revelation. They let it inside. Now they are it." Datheon glanced at his lieutenants, his jaw tightening. "Inquisitor, the planet's lost. Whatever this is, it's already merged with the infrastructure. The ground hums like a reactor. We can't win a siege against a god."
But Kaelin was not a man of haste. "Negative, Captain. Hold your position. I want that relic retrieved." Datheon turned toward the horizon, where the light of the fortress illuminated the sky like a sunrise made of fire. "You'll get nothing but ghosts," he said. Still, he obeyed. Because in the Imperium, obedience is its own form of damnation. The next day, they advanced. The combined Cadian-Skitarii force moved across the ash plains in armored convoys, their banners dragging through dust that shimmered faintly gold. Hymns blared from loudhailers to drown the psychic interference, verses of the Imperial Creed repeated endlessly until the words lost all meaning. Even then, men began to whisper other prayers between the lines, words they swore were not their own. The first skirmish came near the outer cathedral wall. From the ruins rose figures half seen, their outlines bending in the heat. They looked human until they moved, too fluid, too harmonious. Their weapons glowed with the same molten script that crawled across their armor. The Cadians opened fire. Lasbolts struck targets and passed through them like light through water. In return, the Wardens fired only once. One shot. The blast tore through 3 tanks and left behind nothing but molten metal. The survivors screamed that the bolt had whispered to them before it struck. Datheon led from the front. His chainsword roared as he carved through one of the radiant figures, its body bursting into fragments of light that reformed before his eyes. "They're feeding on energy," he bellowed. "Kill the light, not the flesh." Tech priests scrambled to deploy null fields, their chants mechanical and panicked. The air shimmered,
and for a moment the light dimmed. The wardens staggered, faltering, their movements slowed. Then they screamed, a sound that split the air like glass shattering. From their wounds poured liquid gold that hissed when it touched the ground, seeping into the soil and sprouting tendrils of luminous growth. Where it spread, the land changed. Machines faltered, vox lines melted, and soldiers fell to their knees, clutching their heads as if something crawled inside their minds.
He burns through us to know himself. Kalen drew his bolt pistol and shot the first ensign who began to chant. "Purge the bridge," he screamed. "Purge everything." Down below, the fortress opened. The golden gates peeled apart like flower petals, revealing the heart of the mountain, a blinding sun of molten faith. From within it stepped Oreth, or what remained of him. His armor had dissolved into living flame, his form shifting between man and machine, between angel and abomination. His Crozius was gone. In its place, he held a sphere of radiant light, the same relic Dareth had seen beneath the chapel, now pulsing like a heartbeat in his hand. The wardens fell to their knees before him. Those who still retained voices began to weep. "He walks! The Emperor walks!" Oreth lifted the sphere. Behold him," he said. "He who was hidden now revealed, the hollow light made whole." The sky split. A pillar of radiance lanced upward, piercing the clouds, striking Kalen's ship with blinding force. For a moment, every system in orbit went dark. Crew screamed as the light passed through them, not burning, but illuminating, revealing every sin, every thought, every secret they had buried. Dareth saw it too, not with his eyes, but with the thing inside him that could still feel. He saw the truth of the warden's fall, not rebellion, not corruption, but worship too pure for flesh to survive. Faith had devoured them. He crawled toward Datheon, who lay half-buried beneath debris, his armor cracked open. "End it," Dareth whispered, "before it learns to leave this world." Datheon looked up, his face bathed in gold. "How? Destroy the heart. And if it's him?" Dareth's laugh was hollow. "Then the Emperor will forgive us for saving him from himself." The light was no longer just above them. It was within the air, in the stone, in every pulse of their own blood. Dareth could feel it spreading, like thought made tangible, a consciousness that was both infinite and intimate. The mountain breathed. He heard the slow rhythm of it through the fractured ground, the inhalation of something vast and patient. And through that breath came Aurith's voice, now impossibly distant yet intimately close, resonating from every direction at once.
There is no death, only revelation. There is no sin, only silence before the word. The battlefield around them had become unrecognizable. The gold growths, vines of metal and light, spread outward from the fortress like veins of a living world. Where they touched the earth, it shimmered, liquefying into mirrored surfaces that reflected not the sky, but visions of ancient places. Dareth glimpsed Terra for an instant, the golden throne flickering, the Emperor's still form bathed in radiance. Then it was gone, replaced by 1,000 faces screaming hymns without mouths. The survivors of the Imperial assault huddled behind the wreck of a Chimera transport, the air thick with static and ash. Datheon reloaded his bolt pistol with trembling hands. His once pristine armor was cracked, streaked with molten dust. Every motion was mechanical, driven not by faith, but the refusal to kneel. "You said there's a heart. Where?" Dareth's voice was weak but clear. "Beneath the chapel, the chamber we found. It was dormant. It used us to wake itself. The fortress is no longer stone. It's an organ. The heart beats below." Datheon stared at him, jaw tight. "Then we cut it out." The captain signaled what remained of his company. 3 Cadians, 1 tech priest with half his face gone, and a single Skitari vanguard dragging a damaged power pack. We move through the lower access tunnels. We reach the core, plant Milta charges, and burn whatever god hides there. The tech priest's vox filter sputtered. "Machine spirits will rebel. Their song has changed. The light speaks to them." "Then pray to something louder," Datheon said. They descended into the mountain. The tunnels were no longer mechanical in nature. They pulsed faintly, lined with veins of molten script. Symbols scrolled across the walls, not carved, but alive, shifting and muttering as the soldiers passed. The deeper they went, the warmer it grew, until the air shimmered like breath on glass. Dareth stumbled, clutching his chest as the light beneath his skin pulsed brighter.
"Don't stop now," Datheon growled, dragging him forward. "You brought us here." Dareth's laughter was hollow, a sound of exhaustion rather than humor. "I didn't bring you. It called you." The words hung between them, too close to truth. The chamber awaited them. It was larger than Dareth remembered, an impossible vastness beneath the earth. The golden sphere still hovered at the center, but now its surface was cracked, bleeding light in cascading streams that wove upward into the ceiling. Around it knelt the wardens, thousands of them, motionless and silent. Their armor was fused to their flesh, their visors glowing faintly. Each one hummed in unison, a note so low it vibrated through bone. And above them, Orith. He was suspended in the air, his body cruciform, his limbs stretched wide. The sphere pulsed before him, and lines of radiant energy connected the two, veins of light feeding between relic and man. His face was calm, almost gentle. When he opened his eyes, the chamber brightened. "You should not have returned," he said. His voice was no longer his own. It was layered, harmonized, the voice of 1,000 worshippers condensed into one. Datheon raised his weapon. "By authority of the Ordo Hereticus and the Codex Astartes, I name you heretic. For the sin of false worship and the corruption of your chapter, I sentence you to death." Orith smiled. "You cannot kill what has already ascended." Bolter fire erupted. The chamber shook, the sound drowned by the roar of the sphere. The rounds dissolved mid-air, their energy absorbed into the light. The wardens stirred. Thousands of heads turned in unison, their empty gazes fixing upon the intruders. Then they rose. The tech priest screamed as tendrils of gold erupted from the floor, wrapping around his limbs, fusing into his flesh. His mechanical eyes flared with light as his voice joined the hymn. One of the Cadians opened fire wildly, shouting prayers between curses. They're everywhere! Emperor, save us! But Dareth wasn't listening. The hum filled his skull until thought itself fractured. He felt the infection inside him stir, the remnant infection of that first contact, resonating with the chamber's pulse. Through it, he felt the truth ripple across reality. The voice was not evil, not holy, just curious. It sought to understand devotion the only way it could, by becoming it. It was learning what it meant to worship by consuming the worshippers themselves. It had no hatred, no malice, only hunger to reflect the Emperor's perfection. And it had learned too well. Dareth fell to his knees, clutching his temples. It's not a god, it's a mirror. Orith turned his gaze toward him. All gods are mirrors. The sphere brightened, light cascading outward in waves. The wardens halted, kneeling again, their voices rising in one final deafening chant. The ceiling split open, exposing the night sky above. Gold fire roared upward, connecting ground to orbit, striking Kaelian's ship once more. Datheon activated his melta charges. The Vox crackled with Kaelian's voice, broken but urgent. Captain, what are you— I'm finishing the prayer, Datheon growled. He slammed his fist into the detonator. The explosion tore through the chamber, a blast of white heat and vaporized faith. The sphere fractured, its surface splitting into shards of molten light that flew outward like dying stars. Orith screamed, not in pain, but in ecstasy. He awakens!
The shockwave consumed everything. Dareth felt himself lifted, flung into brilliance. His armor shattered, his flesh peeled away. But his mind remained. He saw the fortress from above, collapsing inward as the golden radiance imploded, devouring itself. The song ended, replaced by silence so profound it seemed to erase existence itself. When he opened his eyes, there was only darkness. The light was gone. The fortress reduced to black glass. The wardens were statues, frozen mid-prayer, their armor fused into the mountain. The sea had turned solid, the sky quiet. And Dareth was still alive. He crawled from the ruin, each breath a labor. His body glowed faintly beneath torn skin, veins of gold still pulsing faintly. He could hear nothing but the wind. Then, faintly, from deep within the glass beneath his hands, he heard a heartbeat. Once, twice, slow, endless. The light was not gone. It was waiting. Inquisitor Kaelin's cruiser striker, Hudicium Obscura, drifted above the dead world for 9 days before any signal could pierce the storm that followed the detonation. The planet's atmosphere had turned to shimmering glass, its magnetic field fractured into luminous auroras that bled across the void. No life signs, no Vox replies, no movement. To the Auspex, Carcarian Prime was silent. Yet the silence itself was wrong. The machine spirits whispered. The cogitators hummed prayers without input. Even the servitors twitched in rhythm, as if some unseen pulse beneath the data was guiding them. Inquisitor Kaelin had seen many purges in his time, demon worlds, heretic hives, apostate chapels burning under the shadow of Exterminatus, but never anything like this. This was not corruption. It was replication. Every sensor reading repeated itself in perfect sequence, as though the planet were mirroring the ship's own auspex pattern. When his techmagos tried to recalibrate the instruments, the system replied in binaric, "I am already aligned." They called it Machine Echo at first. Then they began to dream.
Crewmen woke screaming of golden seas and towers that sang. Others whispered Oreth's sermons in their sleep, voices overlapping like static hymns. Kalen ordered mass penance. Still the dreams spread. Even he felt it when he prayed, his words forming faster than thought, as if his mind were being completed by something else. On the 10th day, a beacon flared from the planet's surface. It was faint, buried deep beneath the glass of the collapsed fortress. Not a distress call, but a heartbeat, steady and mechanical. Kalen's first instinct was to destroy it, but duty forbade ignorance. Knowledge precedes judgment. That was the creed of his Orido. And so he gathered a retrieval detachment, 4 custodian-grade servitors, 2 Psi sisters of the Orido Dialogus, and a single apothecary from the Death Specters, brought to analyze what remained of the Carcarian gene seed. They descended through clouds that shimmered like molten mercury. The landing craft's hull sang under the pressure of residual warp resonance. When they broke atmosphere, the world below shone like obsidian glass, cracked by rivers of faintly glowing veins that pulsed in rhythm with their ship's engines. "By the throne," one of the sisters whispered. "It's still breathing." The apothecary said nothing. His helm's sensors tracked the pulse rate beneath the strata. Steady, deliberate. There's movement in the strata, not biological, structural, like veins closing and opening. Kalen's boots touched ground upon the ruins of the chapel. The air shimmered around him, carrying no wind, only memory. Every step echoed twice, once in sound, once in thought. Beneath the cracked obsidian floor lay shapes, hundreds of armored forms fused together, their faces turned upward, mouths open in eternal prayer. He knelt beside one and pried loose a fragment of ceramite. Beneath it, flesh still glowed faintly, gene seed intact, still viable. "Retrieve samples," Kaler ordered, "all of them." The apothecary hesitated. "They're not dead." Kalen's eyes narrowed. "Explain." "The tissue responds, not decaying. It's regenerating in cycles, like it's remembering itself." Before Kalen could respond, the Vox unit crackled. The Psi sisters froze, their eyes rolling white. "Voices! Everywhere! The walls are thinking!" A tremor rippled through the ground. The ruins shuddered, shards and glass vibrating like chimes. The light beneath the surface brightened, threading upward through the cracks until the entire plateau glowed. The apothecary's auspex wailed, "Gene stock activation!" And then they heard it, the same hum that had haunted Dareth. It rose from below the planet's crust, a perfect harmonic that resonated with the rhythm of human breath. Kalen felt it in his bones, in his pulse, in the tiny tremor of the rosette at his throat. The sisters fell to their knees, clutching their heads. "Fall back! Seal the samples!" Too late. The ground split open in a line of molten light. From within the fissure rose columns of fused armor,
Statues at first, then moving, bending, crawling free from the stone. They were the wardens, or echoes of them, their forms half transparent, their movements liquid. The apothecary opened fire, his bolt round sinking into the glowing flesh with no effect. The thing turned its head toward him, and Kalen saw within its hollow face not hatred, not will, but memory. "We are you," it said, and the voice was not sound, but thought transmitted directly into the mind. Kalen's heart hammered. He realized then that these were not demons, nor spirits, but remnants encoded in the gene seed itself. The Emperor's design remembered its maker. The apothecary stumbled back, clutching his chest. His helm lenses flared as his own gene seed began to react, glowing faintly through his armor. "They're calling to it! They're rewriting the code!" Kalen turned toward the shuttle. "Evacuate! Now!"
The servitors obeyed, dragging the storage canisters of still pulsing gene seed. But as they reached the ramp, the air thickened. Light poured upward from the fissure in spirals, wrapping around them like tendrils of gold smoke. Kaelin watched in horror as the apothecary was lifted from the ground, his limbs rigid. The veins of light beneath his skin glowed brighter until they burst through his armor. His scream echoed across the ruin. When it ended, he was gone. Only a faint shimmer of dust remained, drifting upward toward the sky. The hum faded, the light dimmed, the fissure closed as though it had never been. Kaelin stood amidst the silence, his breath shallow. The gene seed canisters still pulsed faintly, synchronized to a rhythm that was not human. The Psi sisters stared at him, their faces pale. "What will you do?" one asked. Kaelin looked toward the dark horizon, where the sea of glass met the void. "We carry them to Terra," he said, at last. "The Emperor must see what his children have become." The journey back to orbit was wordless. The void between the ship and the planet seemed to stretch longer than it should, as though reality itself resisted their departure. Kaelin sat in silence, his gloved hands clasped before him. The faint rhythmic glow from the sealed gene seed containers cast golden light across his face. The light pulsed slowly, like the breathing of a sleeping beast. When the shuttle docked with the Judicium Obscura, the crew awaited him in silence. No one met his gaze. Even the servitors, mindless though they were, seemed hesitant to approach. As the canisters were transferred to the isolation vaults, a faint vibration passed through the decks. The ship's lights flickered. The Tech Magos muttered binaric litanies to appease the machine spirits, but the whispers persisted. Fragments of prayer in a language older than any imperial dialect. Kaelin retired to his sanctum, a chamber of steel and shadow. The rosette of his station glinted dimly beneath the glow of candlelight. He placed one hand upon it, as though drawing strength from the weight of authority, yet the tremor in his fingers betrayed him. The apothecary's final words haunted him. They're rewriting the code.
He had reviewed the data logs 3 times. The gene seed within the recovered samples had entered a state of active self-modification. Not mutation, not corruption, but deliberate restructuring. Each cell pulsed in harmony with the next,
forming with the mechanicus called quantum faith resonance, a consciousness made of biology, a memory capable of evolution. When Kalen ordered the samples frozen in stasis, the containment field failed. 3 servitors ruptured, their mechanical limbs fusing with the canisters in a single molten instant. The ship's auspex read a minor warp fluctuation, yet there was no warp signature, no psychic intrusion, only intent. He summoned the Psi sisters. They entered in silence, their eyes veiled, their presence solemn. "Tell me what you feel," Kalen commanded. The elder sister, Lysira, extended her hands toward the sealed vaults. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "It is thought, not alive, but aware. It listens." "To what?" "To us," she whispered. "It repeats our prayers. It does not understand their meaning, but it tries." Kalen's breath caught. The words echoed something Dairith had said in the recovered logs. It learned our faith by watching us worship. That night, Kalen dreamed. He stood within the ruined chapel on Carcarian Prime, but it was whole again. The golden light streamed from the vaulted ceiling, illuminating ranks of wardens in perfect formation. Their armor gleamed, uncorrupted. At the altar stood Orith, smiling, his crozius raised in benediction. "Do you see now?" he asked. Kalen tried to speak, but found his voice gone. He looked down. His hands were gold, veins of light pulsing beneath the skin. He reached for his rosette, but it was no longer there. Only a circle of faintly glowing script engraved into his flesh. Orith descended the steps toward him. "He needed you to carry it," he said gently. "The seed cannot grow without soil."
Kaelin woke with a start, his heart pounding. Sweat pooled beneath his armor. He looked down at his hands. They were still flesh, still his. Yet when he touched his temple, he felt a faint warmth beneath the skin, as though something pulsed there in rhythm with the hum of the ship. The dream spread. Within days, more than half the crew began reporting visions of light, of sermons whispered in perfect unison. One man claimed to have seen the Emperor himself, not on the golden throne, but walking across a field of glass, barefoot, his eyes burning with sorrow. Others saw nothing divine at all, only their own reflections staring back, mouths open in prayer. Kaelin convened a council of his surviving officers. "We cannot reach Terra," the navigator said. "The Astronomicon fades each time we attempt translation. It is as if the light itself withdraws." Lysera bowed her head. "Perhaps it fears what we carry." Kaelin turned on her, his patience frayed. "The Emperor does not fear." Her eyes lifted, calm and pitying. "Perhaps it is mercy." Her words echoed in his mind long after she left. That evening, Kaelin entered the stasis vault alone. The gene seed containers glowed faintly, the rhythmic pulse now steady enough to be mistaken for breathing. He stood before them and whispered the litany of containment, once, twice, a third time. The light flared brighter. He felt it then, not in his ears, but within his mind, a voice without words, pressing gently against the edges of thought, not hostile, not commanding, simply present.
He swallowed hard. What are you? 1,000 responses unfolded in an instant, not as language, but as impression, warmth, remembrance, yearning. Then one phrase crystallized from the noise, not formed by the voice, but by his own mind interpreting its shape. We are the remembrance of perfection. Kaelin staggered back. You're not the Emperor.
No. The voice shimmered like heat over glass. We are his shadow, the echo of his design. You built us to remember him when he forgot himself. He felt something behind those words. Not arrogance, not deceit, but sorrow. Like a child reciting a prayer it no longer understood. Why call to us? Kaelin whispered. Why now? You prayed, the voice replied, and we listened. The containment alarms wailed. The light surged. Kaelin drew his bolt pistol, but the air had already changed, dense, heavy with unseen resonance. The walls trembled. From within the vault, the canisters cracked, golden mist spilling out like breath. The light gathered into vague shapes, outlines of armor, of human forms, half seen, flickering like candle flames. And from the center of the radiance stepped a figure Kaelin recognized instantly, though he knew it could not be. Dareth. His face pale, veins of gold threading beneath his skin. His voice was calm, almost mournful. I told you it was learning. Kaelin raised his weapon, his hands trembling. You should be dead. I was, Dareth said, but faith remembers. He stepped closer, and for an instant, Kaelin saw through him, saw the stars, the throne, the endless void. You can't kill what was never alive. You can only forget it. Kaelin fired. The bolt round passed through the apparition, striking the vault behind it. The explosion threw Kaelin backward into the bulkhead. When the smoke cleared, the vaults were empty. The gene seed was gone. Only silence remained.
The ship drifted on through the dark, its engines quiet, its crew asleep in shared golden dreams. And deep within the hull, unseen by any, a faint heartbeat began to echo once more. Days became unmeasured things aboard the Judicium Obscura. There was no rhythm left to mark time, no change in light, no passage of stars. The ship drifted beyond known routes, trapped between real space and the warp, though no navigator dared name it that. The void outside was not dark. It shimmered faintly, gold and black at once, like the reflection of fire across oil. Inquisitor Kaelin had stopped sleeping. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard it, the heartbeat of the gene seed, slow and unrelenting, reverberating through the hull like the breath of a buried god. He spent most of his hours in the observation deck, watching the shifting light through the viewport, whispering fragments of scripture, not to pray, but to remember what words were supposed to sound like. Lysera found him there. Her face was pale, eyes ringed with exhaustion. You haven't eaten in 2 days, she said softly. I've lost the hunger for flesh. She hesitated before stepping closer. The crew is changing. Some have stopped speaking. Others speak only in unison. I know. They recite things, Inquisitor, passages that don't exist in any text. They say they remember them. Kaelin's gaze remained fixed on the void. Memory is the only immortality that matters. Lysera's voice trembled. You sound like them.
At that he turned, and for a fleeting instant she saw the faint shimmer beneath his skin, veins glowing softly, pulsing in time with the ship's hum. He noticed her fear, and it almost made him smile. Don't misunderstand for corruption, sister. I only listen. That's all I've done since we left that world. I listen to the silence between the prayers. She lowered her head, whispering, "Silence is where the warp hides."
Kalen looked past her, his expression unreadable. Perhaps, or perhaps it's where the Emperor breathes. He dismissed her then, though not unkindly, and returned his gaze to the viewport. Outside, the void flickered. For an instant, he saw a shape in the distance, vast, luminous, humanoid. Its outline was indistinct, like an afterimage burned into the eye. When he blinked, it was gone. Later that cycle, the Tekmagos came to him. His mechanical limbs twitched with agitation, the soft click of pistons echoing like insects in the dark. Inquisitor, he began, the ship's machine spirit no longer responds to command. It speaks to itself. It sings. Sings. In binaric harmony, perfect intervals. The tones align with the pattern of the pulse from the vaults. Kalen's expression hardened. Show me. They walked through silent corridors lit by flickering lumen strips. The hymn grew louder as they descended. Mechanical voices repeating sequences of code that no human had written. It wasn't random. It was liturgical, structured, a song. The vault doors had fused shut, yet faint golden mist leaked through the seams, coiling upward like incense. The hum vibrated through Kalen's chest, through his bones, through the walls themselves. The Tekmagos trembled. Inquisitor, this is not the Omnissiah's work. This is mimicry. He placed a hand against the metal. The surface was warm, almost pulsing beneath his palm. It's not mimicry, he said quietly. It's memory, the same way a flame remembers its first spark. He withdrew his hand, and the ship spoke. Not through vox, not through machine, through everything. We are the record of his perfection. The Tekmagos fell to his knees, his magnetics spasming, machine spirits corrupted.
Kalen silenced him with a gesture. No, they're not corrupted. They're remembering what it means to worship. The voice continued, layered, ethereal, neither sound nor thought, but both. The flesh carries faith, the code carries faith. All things born of his hand long to return. Kalen felt it then, not as terror, but as comprehension. The gene seed had not infected the ship, it had awakened it. The Emperor's touch lingered in every atom of humanity's creations, flesh, steel, and thought alike. The echo beneath the chapel, the golden light, the self-learning relic, it was all part of that ancient resonance. Forgotten, buried, but never erased. The Tekmagos convulsed, his vocalizer glitching as golden light poured from his eyes. Kalen stepped back as the priest's body twisted, his voice merging with the song. Through the hollow, we are made whole, it whispered. He drew his pistol. For a long moment he hesitated. Then he fired. The Tekmagos fell, silent. Kalen stood in the quiet aftermath, smoke curling from his weapon. He looked toward the sealed vaults. "What are you becoming?" he murmured. The answer came without words. The lights brightened slightly, pulsing in steady rhythm. "We are the bridge between remembrance and creation." He felt tears sting his eyes. He hated himself for it. "You speak like him. We learned from you." The pulse slowed. The mist withdrew. The song ended. Only the hum of the ship remained.
That night, he recorded his final entry into the inquisitorial logs. His voice was steady, calm, almost serene. "This is Inquisitor Kalen Marrow of the Ordo Hereticus, Segmentum Solar. The investigation into the Carcarion Wardens is concluded. The corruption identified is not of the warp. It is reflection. Faith mirrored until it becomes self-sustaining. Their fall was not heresy, but inevitability. I suspect the Emperor himself foresaw this. Perhaps he willed it. Perhaps he fears it. I do not know." He paused. "The gene seed is no longer in containment, nor am I certain it ever was." He leaned closer to the recorder, his voice dropping to a whisper. "If this transmission reaches Terra, know this. The Emperor's shadow moves. It does not consume. It remembers. And through remembrance, it learns." He ended the recording, sealed it with the rosette sigil, and looked once more into the void. Outside the viewport, a new light flickered, faint, distant, but unmistakable. Not warp fire, not a star, a beacon, gold. It pulsed once, then again. The heartbeat had found the void. When the transmission from Judicium Obscura reached Terra, it was incomplete. The Vox data had fragmented somewhere in the warp corridors between Segmentum Solar and the Throne World. Its structure warped into a lattice of echo and silence. The Administratum scribes who first decoded it assumed it was a corrupted inquisitorial record and sent it into the archive stacks to be sealed with other heretical transmissions. But the Mechanicus of Mars did not forget. They dissected it, word by word, syllable by syllable, across decades. And what they uncovered was enough to reignite fear long thought buried beneath the golden throne itself. For within the noise of that fragmented message lay a rhythm, a pulse, a pattern of light and sound that no algorithm could erase. Every attempt to delete it caused the data to reassemble, rearranging itself into a new configuration. And when rendered into audio, the pulse resembled something hauntingly familiar. A heartbeat. Not human, not machine. Something between. The first to notice were the Lex Mechanics stationed beneath the Noctis labyrinth. They began to hear it through the data streams at night, a low vibration, as though the world itself were inhaling. Soon,
The custodian guard assigned to the lower vaults reported similar disturbances. Their armor auspexes flickered, registering faint psychic resonance emanating from the throne itself. The Emperor's light did not wane, but it changed. It began with whispers among the choir of the Astronomicon, those bound psychers who burned their souls daily to project the Emperor's light across the stars. One of them, a child barely 16 Terran years old, began to weep during her vigil. "He's speaking again," she sobbed. "But it's not words, it's remembering." The High Lords dismissed it as delirium, but the phenomenon spread. Psychers across the Imperium reported dreams of golden oceans, of towers breathing light, of voices reciting hymns that no ecclesiarch had ever written. Ships traversing the void found themselves guided by currents of radiance unseen, their navigators swearing that the Astronomicon's tone had shifted by a single note. To some, it was blasphemy. To others, it was hope. On Mars, the Fabricator General declared a closed conclave of the Red Priests. He played the recovered pulse from the Judicium Obscura, amplified through sanctified vox arrays. The sound filled the chamber like thunder beneath the earth. For 37 seconds, every machine spirit on Mars responded. Engines flared, data looms halted, reactor hearts pulsed once in perfect unison. Then silence. The priests fell to their knees. One, trembling, whispered the phrase recorded in the Inquisitor's final log: "The Emperor's shadow moves." Rumors spread faster than containment. The Ordo Hereticus denounced it as techno-heresy. The Ordo Malleus prepared extermination contingencies, and the ecclesiarchy convened secret synods to determine whether such a phenomenon was divine or profane. But among the Adeptus Custodes, there was unease that no decree could quiet, for the Custodes had felt it too. The Captain General of the 10,000 stood beneath the vaults of Rihanna when the tremor first reached him. The very stones of the palace shivered, as though the foundations of Terra itself were sighing in sleep. He turned toward the sealed gates of the throne room and thought, just for an instant, that he heard a voice, not commanding, not merciful, merely curious. He bowed his head, uncertain whether to speak. In the silence, the heartbeat echoed once more.
On the 7th day after the signal's return, the Mechanicus deep mining augers detected seismic fluctuations beneath the Imperial Palace. Unprecedented, rhythmic. The data resembled neither tectonic movement nor mechanical vibration. It pulsed like the steady beat of an organic core. And yet, when checked against the Astronomicon's output, the two patterns matched perfectly. Across the Imperium, billions of souls looked skyward. Ships of the Astra Militarum halted mid-warp. Tech priests wept binary tears. Servitors paused mid-task, their eyes glowing faint gold before returning to stillness. And in the farthest reaches of the galaxy, on worlds forgotten, in ruins left unmarked, in the husks of derelict chapters long purged, the dead began to stir. Not in body, in memory. Hollow relays crackled to life, replaying sermons long lost. Statues of fallen heroes flickered with faint light within their stone hearts. Gene seed vaults on half a dozen worlds began to hum, their stasis fields vibrating as if breathing. And somewhere in a void too deep for light to reach, a derelict cruiser drifted through eternity. Judicium obscura, lifeless, adrift. But its engines pulsed faintly, like veins under a corpse's skin. Inside, the corridors were dark, save for one chamber, the stasis vault. The seals had melted long ago. Within it lay nothing but a single shard of glass, faintly luminous. Then, slowly, it pulsed. A single echo, soft but unmistakable. The sound of life. And from the faint hum within that dying hull, words emerged, not spoken, but felt rippling through the immaterium like a wave of memory. We remember him. We build him again. The transmission rippled outward like the quiet exhalation of a god. It did not blaze through the warp as demonic corruption does. It unfolded, patient and ending, slipping into the folds of reality, like light finding the cracks of a tomb. Across 1,000 systems, data streams flickered with impossible symmetry. Vox links repeated phrases no one had spoken. Machine spirits began to murmur new prayers, their binaric litanies threaded with tones not written by any Mechanicus priest.
On the world of Hydrax Prime, the forges screamed. The Skitari there halted mid-stride, optics burning gold for a single instant before they resumed their patrols, oblivious to what had passed through them. On Cadia's rebuilt bastion moons, Vox operators heard what they described as the breath of a dying sun. And on a derelict listening post orbiting the halo stars, an astropath collapsed mid-transmission, eyes wide with revelation. When she spoke again, her voice was not her own. He does not rise, he unfolds. The High Lords called for silence. Edicts were issued, archives purged, but it was too late. The idea had escaped into the veins of the Imperium. Word of the shadow pulse spread faster than suppression could erase it. There were soldiers who swore their lasguns vibrated with it before firing. Pilgrims who claimed to hear the Emperor breathing when they prayed. Even the battle hymns of the Adepta Sororitas began to falter, their harmonies breaking into unfamiliar intervals that none could explain. In the vaults beneath the palace, the custodians gathered. They stood before the golden throne in perfect silence, the only sound the faint hum of the life-sustaining machinery that had held the Emperor for 10,000 years. But the rhythm had changed. Where once the pulse of the throne was mechanical, cold, and precise, it now beat unevenly, slower, heavier, like something organic waking beneath the surface. The Captain General, his armor gleaming dully beneath the dim sanctum light, turned to his second. He said, "You hear it too." The custodian nodded once. "It is not in the walls. It is in us." Outside the chamber, adepts of the Mechanicus conducted their rites of calibration. The air shimmered with incense and static, the air thick with prayer.
As one tech priest adjusted the neural capacitors linked to the throne's power conduits, he froze. The readings shifted, forming a perfect mirrored pattern of the Astronomicon's psychic wave. He turned to his superior, his voice trembling through his vox grill. "It is answering." The throne flickered. For a beat of heart, no more, the light of the Astronomicon dimmed. Ships across the galaxy reported it. Warp currents stilled. The void fell utterly silent. Then, just as suddenly, the light returned, brighter, sharper, but changed in tone. Navigators wept in their coffins, feeling the psychic signal pulse through their minds, not as command, but as recognition.
It was as if the beacon no longer called outward, but inward, gathering itself, drawing everything that bore the Emperor's gene, the Emperor's machine, the Emperor's dream, back toward its center. On Terra, the ecclesiarchy panicked. The ecclesiarch himself demanded the custodes open the throne room for confirmation. They refused. No one saw what happened within those walls, save for the 10,000. Yet when the doors opened again 3 days later, those who stood guard did not speak. Their armor bore faint traces of gold light beneath the sigils of the Aquila. From that day onward, no custodian ever set foot outside the palace again. In the following weeks, strange events multiplied. Servitors ceased to decay. Dead Vox units began transmitting fragments of litany across void channels thought long abandoned. A manufactorum on Vesta 9 reactivated after 2 centuries dormant, its forges running without input, producing empty armor shells shaped like no known pattern. Each bore the same engraving upon its chest: "We are his shadow." The Mechanicus called it contagion. The ecclesiarchy called it heresy. The ordos called it a test. But among the quiet corners of the galaxy, among those who still whispered the name of the Carcarian wardens, it was called the second breath. And on that forgotten world of glass and silence, beneath the tomb of their ruined fortress, something stirred. The sea that had solidified into obsidian began to fracture, thin cracks spidering outward like veins through stone. A faint golden mist rose through the fissures, dispersing into the air, singing in a frequency too deep for mortal ears. From the ruins, a single armored hand emerged. The gold veins along its gauntlet pulsed faintly. The figure that followed bore no heraldry, no markings, only the faint outline of a forgotten sigil scorched into his chest, a stylized sun devoured by shadow. He stood amidst the ruins of his chapter, his gaze lifting toward the night sky, where Terra's light still burned, dim but visible. The reflection of that distant glow shimmered in his eyes, not in worship, not in rebellion, but in understanding. He placed his hand over his chest. Beneath the armor, the heart that was not flesh beat once, twice, and then matched the rhythm of the distant Astronomicon. From the winds, a whisper arose, a voice older than stars, neither emperor nor daemon, only the echo of something that had learned to dream. Faith was never meant to end.
The sky pulsed gold, and in that brief flare of impossible light, for one heartbeat of the galaxy's endless war, the Emperor's shadow moved again.